So, hello, this is John Marshall presenting the second part of a two-part series videos. The first one was for my midterm project for Computer Science Information 242 at Renton Technical College. And this second one is a continuation of that for my final project for Renton Technical College. The nature of my project is a model view controller backdoor database from Microsoft SQL Server running it. And it has to do with a vegetation monitoring and mapping project at Discovery Park, Washington. And what you're looking at right now is the title page or the main page for that website that I'm creating. I'm just going to go through fairly quickly, going over what I have put together so far in the website. It's still a work in progress, but it's getting closer to where it's intended to be. So what you're looking at, as I said, is the title page. There are some buttons here that can get you some other information that I put together in a slightly less sophisticated web application. It allows the users of this newer version to go back and check out some of the functionality that I've got going so far in this other application, but will someday be part of the one I'm developing now as well. It's just not quite ready for rendering in the newer application yet, and but that is part of the future cast for this this particular application. So there's also another tab here to, if there's more actual content that you're interested in understanding what was done for the monitoring project and how it was all put together and how the data was collected and all of those things. So that's all available as well via this newer version. Another thing that I've been working on is some of the modifications to the different pages themselves, some what I would call using templates and modifying templates, customizing templates. This is a page, a view page with tab functionality, hiding and displaying different text to illustrate the different tasks and benefits of the project. It's in my About tab. I've developed a tab that has a carousel to give the viewers a little bit of an idea of what Discovery Park is like and what the vegetation looks like there. This, by the way, is Acer macrophyllum, or macro meaning big and phyllum meaning leaf, Acer meaning maple, so big leaf maple. It's a tree at Discovery Park that dominates much of the park's vegetation. And then you were already privy to some of these things that are on ArcGIS Online right now, web maps that I put together for this earlier project. So this is what really the main theme of the database is the data. This illustrates the data in the sample plots that were collected in 2001. And the different attributes of that data. For this particular web application, I've got some mouse over functionality here for the different table fields. And we'll go into that a little bit later. Finally, the focal metrics for the data is the sample plot moisture index and the sample plot moisture weed index. This is the data that is illustrating how wet the site is relative to the vegetation that is able to tolerate that degree of soil saturation, and what the relative weed account is at the site. In other words, a 1 would be very low, mostly native plants, and a 5 would be almost non-native or non-native invasive plants. And by the way, just for a range on the weed index, on the moisture index, a 1 would mean all obligate wetland species that are typically adapted to high water tables, high water saturation in the root zones of plants, and 5s would be much drier or low moisture in that zone. And actually, it's not even the moisture it's really recording; it's the oxygen. The more moisture, the less oxygen. So it's these plants that have a real low numbers have a real high tolerance to low oxygen because of the high water. So that explains that a little bit. So I'm going to come out of this now, and I'm going to change up a little bit and go into basically a PowerPoint that I have here that I think by going through this, we'll be able to get a little better feel for what the procedure was that I ended up going through to put all this web application together. So that, okay. And so I found from earlier experience that I can't actually show the PowerPoint outright. I have to go through it in this mode in order for you to see it on the interface I have here with the webcast. So anyway, this is the title page to my project for my grade at Computer Science Information 242, Discovery Park Vegetation Monitoring and Management Platform. John Marshall, that's me. This is a map of Discovery Park. Give you a little better idea where it's at on the Puget Sound. And still a little better gauging here, next, showing it just southwest of the Ballard Locks area in Seattle, Washington. And some pictures of the area to give you an idea of what it's like to walk around in that park. This, of course, is the vegetation, or a part of the vegetation, and that is, of course, what the data is all about that we're collecting for this database and this web application. And we've already talked about the bigleaf maple. This is a charter that sort of shows what would it be like to actually go through this and do this as a real-world project. And interestingly enough, this is actually in progress of possibly becoming a real-world project. I have a meeting scheduled in less than a month from now to discuss with Discovery Park and other stakeholders, Friends of Discovery Park and other stakeholders, putting together some sort of a enterprise web-based database management system that will have quite a bit more functionality than the one I'm putting together right now, but that this could be sort of the start, sort of a pilot project towards getting to that larger goal and effort. But basically what we're going to be doing initially is just going to the different stakeholders and asking them questions about what kind of enterprise system they'd like, what kind of data they'd like to collect, how they like to manage it, and help create a web map application and a database management system that meets the needs and goals and objectives of those stakeholders. This is a brief checklist I put together, or actually my instructor put together, and I've actually fulfilled in terms of putting this particular project. And a lot of each of these checkpoints will be kind of what we're going to go through to show that I've actually demonstrated that competency in those different areas for developing this project. And this is a little bit of an overview of what we're doing here. There's actually 4 components. The model, the view, and the controller are all on the web application site, and then the database is running in the background, and that connects into the model view controller through the model part of the program. And then we have a controller that sort of acts like a switchboard that takes that data and puts it into views as it's requested by the viewer through the graphical user interface. And we've seen a little bit about that earlier when I was going through the web application when we first started. But this sort of gives you a little bird's eye view of it, what's going on in the database and in the web application, and how these things are connected together. So the first thing we did was to create the database and establish referential relationships between the different entity tables. And this shows the one-to-many relationships between the site, one site, many site visits, one site visit, many units, one unit, many transects, and one transect, many sample plots. It looks like I'm also going to be having a functionality where sample plots can be taken inside the units without being on a transect. So I'll have actually eventually two referential relationships coming out of my units, one to my transect, and then transitionally to the sample plots, and one directly from the units and one directly to the sample plots. And then the bottom table, two tables show tables I've been playing with to display those statistics, those focal statistics. We talked about the moisture indexes and the weed indexes, and we'll learn a little bit more about that as we progress here. So want to be sure that we get all our queries and stored procedures before we go into what we call an entity framework scaffold. And this is a query that I developed to glean from the 2,000 plus records in the data what each sample plot, moisture index and weed index turned out to be. And this is a SQL or SQL query. And then I put that into a stored procedure so I can automate that. It's partially working right now in that I can definitely get the data results, as you see in the bottom. It's showing the query showing the moisture index and speed and weed index for sample plots 1 and 2 from the data that you see in the top part of the screen. But I haven't got it developed to the point right now where I can automatically populate those tables that we saw earlier. And I am having to populate those manually with the data, and that's something that needs to be rectified in the future. So we're going to be creating this ASP.NET web project in Microsoft Visual Studio IDE, and creating the MVC template and using that to create an MVC template, which will establish my folders and references and a number of other quite a bit more information and functionality for the web application, and we'll see that shortly. I did create the database first, and I did that in Microsoft SQL Server. Then when I ran the ADO.NET Entity Data Model, that scaffolded all the models of using the database that was already developed and connected to the MVC application to create those models. And so it's an automated process that really does a lot of coding automatically using this entity framework procedure. And this is what one of the models looks like after this entity framework develops it. This is for the sample plot entity table, and it shows all the properties of that table here in code, which actually and now is enabling me to use that database and do things with that data that I wouldn't have been able to do without this code being written. This is another model that the entity framework put together for the sample plot moisture index entity. Moisture index and weed index, I should say. It also, when the entity framework does the scaffolding, it also creates a controller, home controller, and views are connected to that home controller that have what we call CRUD scaffolding, create, read, update, and delete scaffolding. And this is a basically allowing users to go in and work with the data. It's a combination of SQL language, but also all the code is in C#, and the C# is in the views in what's called Razor C# classes, CS HTML classes that are enabling the C# to help work inside the HTML framework to let the user interact with the data in the view pages of the website. Also, the MVC put together a number of jQuery scripts and Bootstrap Cascade style sheets and fonts, and prepared a shared layout. All of that was done through the entity framework, but every bit of that is customizable, and that's really what the main part of this rest of this presentation is going to be about, is how I customized it. So this is an example of my home controller, and it shows the different methods that are being applied there. The index is the default method, and if we go to the view from that default method, you'll see the home page. Now, this wasn't exactly how the home page looked at when it was first developed in the entity framework. I've customized it already quite a bit from that to meet my project objectives. But there were hyperlinks already established, and I was just able to reconfigure them to be the hyperlinks I wanted instead of the ones they gave me, and add the text I wanted instead of the text it gave me. So that was the nature of that modification. Then here's an illustration of how the Cascade style sheet was used to change the color in the initial template that was provided through the entity framework. So if you look at the top and the body, you'll see there's a burleywood background color that I put in there and coded in there. And this is how it manifests out on the earlier version of that, the web page we were looking at, web pages we were looking at. So the MVC controllers and views are will have to be accessed in a navigation bar, and so there's a way to make sure that you can have access to those. So you have to do that through your controllers. I guess this slide is going to show you the controller I developed for my sample plots. So I got ahead of myself a little bit. If you see the index method in this particular controller, that'll get you to the sample plot view page, and that's what that looks like in the earlier version. Up there on the top of that, you'll see the navigation bar I was talking about with the different tabs to get to the different pages that we were using earlier and that you can see here. And this is the home, another controller that I developed for the moisture index, weed index controller. And this is the view page that that renders through that method. And here's some of that CRUD capability for the details, for editing the data. This is a earlier version of the About page that we looked at earlier. What it had, mine had the tabs. This is before tabs were developed for it, and a contact page. So this is what I was getting at earlier. This is what, in order to get that that access to the navigation bar, you have to go into your layout page, and you have to add an action link. You see in the center of the page where that division with the nav bar collapse is that you'll see a number of HTML action links, and you have to add action links that get you to that nav bar functionality. And you'll see that the first one you have here is the name you want to show up on your navigation bar. The second one is the actual method that you're going to be calling from your from whatever controller you're calling that method from, and then you have your controller at the end of it. And once you put that in there, then that gets that displayed up in the navigation bar, and you can get to it. So we're going to go through some more of the Bootstrap customization. This was we were asked to, in that checklist, to put together a whole new template for our project, and so I downloaded my template, a free template from this Bootswatch website. See the URL at the top here, and this shows you basically going through the process of selecting a particular template, looking at what the template, going in and looking at what the template might look like when it's rendered on your project, and actually going and selecting out the Bootstrap CSS Cascade style sheet from the template, and then downloading that CSS code, and taking that code and copying it and then putting it in your content folder, and making sure that you rename it before you do that. And so you'll know what it is, and then you're gonna go into your bundle config class, and you're going to put that inside that bundle a method, bundle.add method, so that gets that all that template gets added into your web page, and so it's accessible into your web page. And once you do that, that's you see now it changed the overall look and feel of the web page quite significantly. So jQuery, we're using combination with HTML tags to do some of the coding that gave me some of the functionality. This one, remember, was about the About web page, where we had that alternating view tabs. And this shows the jQueries at the top, those HTTPS tags there, URLs up there are what's bringing in that basically JavaScript script functionality that enables me to use these tabs that I've put together in the HTML code to access and make these different tabs alternatingly viewable on my actual web page, giving it that sort of that interactive capability that we have now. And this is, as you remember, this is what that looks like once you render that web page and touch on those tabs. So another thing we were asked to do is a mouse over function for our views, and this is what the jQuery script was that I used to access it, and one of the functions that are used for the mouse query itself to get it working. And this is JavaScript. And then once I have that in there and I've used the right tags, I now have this mouse over function for my titles for the different fields in this particular table for the sample plot data, and likewise for the moisture index, weed index data. So the future of this is we've got a lot more to do on this. This is just really the very, very, very beginning. One of the things that needs to be done is to get a lot more automated capability with the CRUD. In other words, for that automated stored procedure that gets the moisture indexes, weed indexes, I need to get all of that data into that table and into that view automatically. I don't want to have to manually insert that data into that view. And so that's something that's being worked on right now, that I'm working on. And another thing is that in order to get exchange data and to both upload and download it into this database and to allow others to download it into their own applications, we need to have bulk data upload and download capabilities via our web graphical user interfaces. And so that's something that's going to be coming. We need to have able to standardize and customize our automatic queries and able to do that through our web graphical user interface. The moisture index, weed index is just one of those. There'll be others as we talk to the stakeholders and figure out what their needs are. Then we also need this to be in an enterprise system so people can access the data from the field, from their office. Having different ways of acquiring data, maybe their mobile devices, handheld mobile devices in the field, maybe their mobile devices connected to unmanned aerial vehicles, maybe their data recorders that are set in place and are timing real-time data streaming. There's a whole bunch of ways that we want this web application and database to be connected into a whole system, an enterprise system. And then finally, we're really going to want to get a spatial representation that allows some local geoprocessing and rendering of both static and web map applications. You saw that some of that earlier from ArcGIS Online web map applications, but we want that entrained right into this application. So it's a seamless process of accessing all that spatial information and spatial data and working with it. So that's another vision for the future. And what some of that might look like are basically do these kinds of things. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be in class and you'll be able to ask those. So I'm going to come out of the out of my database here. And then I'm going to come back up here. And so that's basically the gist of it. I hope that answers the questions and satisfies the project objective of getting a presentation to display and illustrate and explain the procedures that I use to create the web application and the database. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop broadcasting now. Goodbye.